Well, good afternoon. Thank you for making it out to SCORR Conference 2015. Welcome. My name is Chase Andre.
I'm Alicia. We're married.
And we're so glad you can be here. Thank you for coming. So the title of our talk today is It's More Than Race, Defining Diversity Through Intersecting Identities. So we thought we'd start with just telling you a little bit about us. Like we said, we were married. We got here more or less through Alicia's work at MEPD, and that's how we got to know one another. So we love talking about diversity in all its aspects, and are investing ourselves in these conversations. For me, when was the moment I first started to think about diversity? There's probably several in my life, and the one that I think about, I lived in Taiwan for a year. I went to university for about 2 years, had to take a break because of finances, and in that few-year gap, one of those years I lived abroad. And for the first time, I was pretty well dislocated. I grew up in Orange County, which isn't far from here, and for a white guy, it's a pretty comfortable place to grow up. You don't have to think about diversity a whole lot. But all of a sudden, when I was living in Taiwan, I faced it in new ways. And I think in that space, I not only learned about another culture, I learned about my own. So I've been thinking about diversity ever since.
For myself, I was an undergrad here at Biola, and I was just gonna say we're standing kind of close because there's one microphone.
And we like each other.
So just to make sure my voice gets in there. So yeah, I went to undergrad here at Biola. I was actually a nursing major. I'm a registered nurse. My life took a slight detour that I didn't expect to end up working here in multi-ethnic programs at Biola. But that could be a whole nother session in and of itself, I think. But during my time at Biola, my transition to school was very easy. It was very comfortable. And I didn't realize until almost the time I was leaving Biola was that that's not the experience for all students at Biola. And I realized that who I am, my family, all these different aspects of who I was shaped me and formed me and gave me a worldview. And that might sound kind of basic, but it was revolutionary for me to realize that growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, an upper middle class family, these things shaped me and formed me, and they impacted who I am and how I viewed the world. And so when I came to Biola, I was honestly pretty frustrated. I would hear things about diversity and racial reconciliation. I would be like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? I just don't understand. Well, why is this important? Why are we still talking about this? Isn't this making things worse because we're talking about things? And eventually I just kind of surrendered that to the Holy Spirit. And I said, okay, I keep hearing this, around campus, that this is important for us as Christians to talk about. So Holy Spirit, if this is important to your kingdom, if this is important to the kingdom of God, you're going to have to make it known to me. So show me. And so it was then when I started to approach the conversation, I think, with a little more humility and more about learning about myself as well as hearing other people's experiences. And that radically changed what I understood the conversation to be about in terms of diversity and racial reconciliation. But it doesn't stop there, right? So it was actually my process as a woman and my gender, discovering my gender identity, that really furthered and allowed me to understand the conversation about race and ethnicity. And of course from there, there's so many other aspects to our identity, which we're going to get into today, that I've also began to process as well, and hope that you guys are too.
And so like Alicia said, no matter, if we were just to cover our stories, that could be a whole session. So what are two white people doing in a classroom talking about intersectionality and our identity? Well, we'll get into that a little bit more. But I want to say, no matter where you are and what you've thought about, maybe you've been sort of blind to this discussion about diversity. You've never really considered it. Or maybe you're kind of tired of it. You're a little frustrated. I don't know. Maybe you have to be here. That's okay. We want to start there and explore it together. We've heard a question pretty often, especially around Christian college campuses, and that's if there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male or female, and we're all one in Christ, why are we talking about diversity? What's the big idea? This verse is interesting because it does give a kind of thick description of what diversity is, what intersects, part of our identities are intersecting to make us diverse people. You can see there's the race and ethnicity piece between Jew and Greek. There's the class and socioeconomic piece between slave and free, male and female. It gets into gender a bit. And so this verse is kind of getting towards what we may be talking about today. But we want to stay up front. We believe it's important to speak and learn about diversity for three reasons. One, we think diversity is global. We live in a diverse world, and that matters. We also think it's very personal, that you are a diverse person. And then finally, we also believe that diversity is biblical, that the Bible celebrates that which makes us different, and that'll be something worth talking about today. So first, we want to note that we live in a diverse world. I love this quote from Aaron Meyer, a great book, The Culture Map, that came out last year. It is quite possible, even common, to work across cultures for decades and travel frequently for business, and I added maybe for vacation, maybe for a missions trip, while remaining unaware and uninformed about how culture impacts you. You see, if we don't learn to examine how cultures engulfing us affect and impact our lives, we're not only going to be uninformed about the world around us, we're going to be uninformed about ourselves. That's because diversity is personal. And so when we talk about diversity as a personal aspect, a personal concept for ourselves, we're getting into this thought and idea of cultural identity. Catherine Sorrells, a communications professional and scholar, she says in her book, Intercultural Communication, our situated sense of self that is shaped by our cultural experiences and our social locations begins to make up our cultural identity. There's a number of cultures that we navigate, right? And so we might have multiple cultural identities that build up and create us as a whole people. For example, I'm a man, Alicia's a woman. That's a good thing. And as a man, I enact a number of roles that are played into because of my biological maleness and my gender. I am not a man in a vacuum. I'm not an island. I'm a man in relationship. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a husband. And each of those roles call me to act and perform in different ways. So we want to turn this to you.
So what are aspects of your identity? We're going to take time now to just go ahead and pair up with the person next to you and think through, what are the different aspects of our identity? Gender, ethnicity, we've mentioned a few of them. So talk together and explore what are different aspects, and then we're going to write them up on the board. All right? How about 60 seconds? Go. All right. All right. What are some of the things that you came up with? What makes us who we are as human beings? What makes up our identity? Just shout them out. Culture. What else?
Religious
background. Religious. Family.
Good.
Location.
Sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation and identity, right?
Economic class.
Yes, class. Socioeconomics. What else? Education? Good.
Good.
Sports.
Sports.
What you enjoy, your passions.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs.
Totally. Jobs.
Good. Gender.
Gender.
What else? Relationships. Anyone come up with age?
Mm.
Yeah? What else?
I think with age also like generation.
Yes.
Sure.
Good.
Location in time. Yeah, that's good. Now, all of these, many of these at least, have to do with our bodies and being embodied human beings. And our bodies all work a little differently. And so some people are able-bodied, some people are disabled or have limitations on their physical makeup. So I think that's one as well, ability.
Any other last ones? This is not a conclusive list. We're not going to publish this, don't worry. Other suggestions, ideas? Well, all of this makes up who we are, right? And a lot of these things are changeable. They might vary depending on where we live or who our family is, where we are in time as we grow older, if our socioeconomic status changes. And so we are continually growing people. There's certain things about us that aren't going to change. And that's also aspects of our identity that we need to embrace and find out more about. So we're all on this journey together, and we want to provide you guys time to explore your identities. So we're going to do an activity with the note cards, and I'll start passing these out. If you want to write your, pick 5 of these aspects that we wrote up here on the board, or something else maybe that you didn't say, and write those 5 aspects on this card. So for example, for myself, I would put ethnicity/race, not the same thing, whole other conversation. White, I would put gender, female, etc. Okay, so pick 5 things from these lists that you feel like maybe these are things that you've thought the most about in your life. The 5 aspects you've thought most about in your identity. Okay?
Yeah.
Yep. So we go ahead and stand up. You're gonna find 2 people. One person that has 3 things on their list that are the same as yours. Okay? The second person that you're gonna find is someone that has 3 things that are different than your list. Okay? And then find that person. So find these people just one at a time. Ask that first person, what is the thing you're most proud of in life? Okay? And then the same question to the second person. And then, okay? Everybody stand up. Start mingling. All right, how was that activity for you? Was it hard to find people that were the same or that were different?
Which was more difficult?
Same.
It was more difficult to find the same. Okay. More difficult to find the same.
All right. Any other thoughts? What are you taking away from that? You hear some interesting stories about what people are most proud of? You guys did answer the question?
Does anyone want to share what they're most proud of, what they spoke out?
What are you most proud of in life?
I'm most proud of being biracial.
Awesome. That's cool.
My dad is black and my mom's white, so
Very
just
cool.
finding my identity in both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been a journey.
yeah, I believe it. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah,
Brady and I are most proud of our family influence
cool.
and how we were brought up and the way it shaped our whole group.
Cool.
Awesome.
Anyone from this side of the room? Maybe a lady?
And when I was sharing with someone, I said that if you'd asked me that 3 years ago, it wouldn't have been that.
Wow.
And so, and most of the things I would have been proud of maybe wouldn't have been visible. And so learning to be proud of some things that are more visible.
Wow. And that's just it. It is a journey, huh? Journey in these aspects of our identity morphing, but also our understanding and appreciation of them morphing as well as we learn more about ourselves and we learn to interact in the world around us.
So the influence of our families that was just mentioned has a huge deal to do with who we are as people, right? We inherit a lot of these things, our ethnic background as well as family culture, all of that we inherit a lot from our family. There's other forces that shape us in life, but they are one of the predominant forces that shape us. So we're now going to group you into groups of 3, but I'm going to require that you can't be with other people from your school that you know, okay? So go ahead and get into groups of 3. We're going to spend time talking more in depth about our family.
Was there something you realized was in your family culture that you hadn't put into words until this activity happened? Yeah.
I think the idea of pursuing the American dream is something that's got through our family, and I think that's come down to us coming to schools like this.
Sure, yeah. How do you articulate the American dream?
The American dream of really being able to pursue what you love individually and like turn that into your career and then work for that and live a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you feel like your family was explicit in how they communicated that or more implicit?
I think they just did a good job of doing it and said this is something that you can achieve and a fulfilling way to live your life.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else?
I think just processing things, and I really like the last question about how does your family look, women or men roles? Because I realized that even though from my bigger culture, women are perceived a certain way. In my family, my own family, and even my mom, you have to be independent. You can't rely on people to do things. Nothing's gonna get done unless you do it by yourself. So, for my family, women are seen as someone that should be able to rely on themselves, and that's very different to the big general culture.
Yeah, so there's competing narratives there. Very good. Back here? You want to share?
I definitely realized that members of my family are afraid of commitment. And so, with the question about the last question. Because my parents didn't marry, and once they separated, they had relationships, but they still didn't marry. And it's been like, both of them have gone on to a different relationship, and it's been long term, but it's not marriage. So they never said, oh yeah, we just don't they never said that.
Sure.
But your actions show that you don't really want to commit, or something's hindering you from truly committing, or you're just not picking the right person, or whatever it may be. So what I want to do is change that and not just be with someone who I don't intend to marry, like dating with intention. And so, that's something that I want to change and learn from, because it's not, God's design, it's not where blessings flow, type of thing. You get, you get what I'm saying? I don't know, it's not marriage is so much more secure, safe, blessed, it's not perfect, it's not La La Land, but I'm sure
It's true.
it is. But I'm sure it is, ultimately, it's God's design, So it's blessed.
And I think what you're saying is important. We learn and form our cultural identity both by what is said and what's implied and the actions that are enacted around us, not only by the explicit messages that we receive. And we have an opportunity to shift and shape and mold that cultural expression of our identity, just like you expressed that what you saw in the past isn't necessarily something you want to replicate in the future. And so because you identified it and you said, I see that, you named it, you can say, you have power over that to change what it is you want to change for yourself. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe one more?
did you learn about your own family culture?
Yeah.
Mine, we don't really take from either side. We've kind of created our own family.
Absolutely.
Being military kid, we learn not to rely on family. Just kind of do your own thing. And so, like, a typical meal for my biracial family when I was younger was curry rice, because we lived in Japan for a little bit.
Yeah.
Black dad, white mom, how do you come up with curry rice? So
Yeah.
that's pretty much how we've lived out our life. And so very just kind of like self-reliant on our family and our experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Location is really important. Location shapes and shifts our expression of our cultural identity. Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Let's change the question just a touch. Did anyone learn anything about anyone else's family culture? Sure.
Yeah, similar to hers, like independence, you know, my good friend here, who I just met, you know, in depth today. Basically, you know, independence, you know, not waiting on a male to provide for you, being a go-getter, being driven, you know, which is a great quality. You know, not waiting on handouts, making your life.
Sure.
You know, just not waiting on anything. So that's what I learned.
Cool. Cool. Anyone else?
And we've kind of left this vague. We said diversity in our families, but how we define our family can even be very different, right? I think I'm used to thinking about my family as those who grew up in my household, which was just my nuclear family. It was
Right.
my parents, and then I'm the second oldest of 8 kids. So it was a big family, but that was our family. So we didn't have multiple generations living in our home, but that influences a family culture as well. How you grow up, how you think about relationships within your family. And yeah.
And some families are more tightly tied to their family line, their heritage. I know for me, half my family is Irish, and I know absolutely nothing about that except that I swell with ethnic pride whenever we eat potatoes. And that's about it. That's all I know about my Irishness. And so for question number C, share anything you know about your family's journey to or in America. I don't really have an answer for that. I know my great-grandma and my great-grandpa, and I spent most of my childhood, my years up until just recently, living with and around them, and but that doesn't mean I know anything before them. They talk about their parents some, but I couldn't even tell you if it was their parents or their parents' parents that came here. I'm not very connected to my family history, unfortunately. Some people are. Some people see that question and they think, oh, 3 generations ago, my family came to this country. Their concept of family is much more stretched through time than mine is. Does anyone have that experience? They saw this question not as their nuclear family, but more multi-generational. Did you? Yeah? Awesome. Do you want to tell us how you answered that? Briefly?
My great-grandparents came over through Texas and paid like 5 cents to cross the border.
Wow.
Stayed here after that.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. Yes?
My great-grandparents had a ticket to get on the Titanic, but they missed it.
Wow.
So they were going to be like in the bottom of the ship, and they were supposed to like
Wow.
board the ship, but they missed it. So.
That's a powerful family story.
And you
Yeah.
are here today because
Right, yeah.
wow.
Incredible. Yeah?
I know all 3 of us brought up our grandmas like when we were talking about the last question, but it just kind of came into that like our grandmas all we were talking about like the food they make us and like all that stuff. And I don't really miss my grandma. You guys, you live with you guys?
She's there in the house.
Yeah.
She's a big part.
It's cool. Yeah, all of our grandmas are like around a lot, so it's kind of cool.
Awesome.
This is my last time talking.
Saying good things. Keep it going.
Okay, so I don't know anything past my grandparents.
Yeah.
So from my paternal side, my dad is from England, and his parents, my grandfather is from Trinidad,
Okay.
and my grandmother is from St. Vincent. and then my grandpa moved to St. Vincent where he met my grandmother, and then they moved to England where they had my dad and his siblings, and then they came to the youngest three, and my grandparents came to the U.S. And I'm here today.
That's awesome. That's a journey. Great.
Anyone else want to share about their family? Some people have had more positive experiences, right? That's in their family legacy of being, choosing to come to America.
Mm-hmm.
Other people were not,
Mm-hmm.
right? They were forced to come in different ways. So that's all a part of who we are, and that's in our legacy, in our heritage. We need to acknowledge that and, figure out what that means for us to live in light of that today. So, all right. So, we've talked about a little about what we know, sharing about our families, how they've impacted us, how they've shaped us. But there's still a lot to us that we don't know, I think, because we're constantly growing and we're constantly changing. And at different points in our life, we might have things come up that we explore about ourselves. And so looking at this list on the board, what do you feel like you haven't thought about very much in terms of aspects of your identities? Now turn back into your small groups and discuss what questions do you have about your identity regarding those things that you haven't thought about more. What do you want to explore? What do you want to look into in the future?
What were some of the questions that you touched on? What did you talk about? What questions or aspects of your identity you think you may want to explore in the future? Yeah.
One of the things we talked about was family and being very familiar with kind of our nuclear family, but not so much with generations further back or even extended family. I tend to think of my family as being very small when in reality there's a large Mexican family surrounding it, and we see each other at funerals and weddings.
Right.
That's pretty much it, but also like taking the time and realizing and looking at it, because for me, a lot of my older generation grandparents and aunt have all passed away. So it's slowly losing like those pieces, and if no one's talking to each other or learning the stories, then how is that going to carry on? And so just like the need to look more into that and to see how can you still find those stories, if at all possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something I resonate with a lot. So thank you for saying that. Depending on future life choices and where you end up, you may find yourself blending families. And that's one thing, ever since marrying Alicia, we're learning a new family culture as she experiences my family and I experience her family. Her mom's dad, her grandpa, is a huge advocate for learning family histories and going through genealogy, and he has books and books and books. And
Bookcases. We're not talking books. We're talking
bookcases and bookcases and bookcases
binders.
in his house. And he has incredible stories going back generations. I really appreciate that value of her families, which is absent in mine. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Any other? Yeah.
We talked about religion in light of like the difference between religion and faith and having identity in those, because like being going to Christian school or whatever it is, Christianity is looked at as such like a different term to everyone. We all have these like different ideas of it and different practices that we put in the religion. That if we go around and we're like we have full identity in like I am a Christian. Like Jesus didn't like walk around and was like, "Hey guys, I'm a Christian," you know. So, like just in light of being careful on how other people can identify with us in relationship, is like if they know we're a Christian or something, is that going to put up a wall there, or are they going to like turn off completely because they're like that's a Christian? Whereas if I identify with my faith and like my belief in Jesus Christ, that should allow me to have a relationship with non-Christians and other people who, like, if they didn't know I'm a Christian, I at least, like, still carry my core beliefs and values over there. So for me, like the religion versus like the faith
Yeah.
is kind of a different identity.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is that these things mean, oh, it's on this side. These things mean certain, they have certain value and meaning to us as we understand them, but they can mean other things to other people. And so every interaction that we have is so complex as we're bringing all of our intricacies together with assumptions about the other people's complexities as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and the message we communicate, it's not just enough to think about what we say, we have to think about how the recipient receives it. Our intent might be great, but the impact of our message might fall short of what we're aiming for. And I think you're touching on that. You know, there's this faith, this personal expression and belief and life about our identities, particularly religious identities. And then there's this religion, this corporate identity. And it's important to realize that none of us are Christians in a vacuum. You'll never see anywhere in the Bible that there's a Christian by themselves. There's always a community. And if there's a new Christian, a community comes around them very quickly. And so that corporate identity is important, but how those identities, both our personal and our corporate identities, interact with the world around us, we have to consider how our messages might be received and how we are sending them about who we are. So thank you. Yeah, that's great. Let's say one more. Anyone else?
What do you want to continue to explore about your identity?
Something I was talking about was ability, and the idea of, I just kind of started realizing more recently, like how my ability to speak, I took American Sign Language, and so my ability to speak has so much to do with me and my identity and what I can do, because I, like leading ministry or something like that, it's like I couldn't do that if I wasn't able to speak to these people, and that's a huge part of my identity, or my ability to see and everything that comes from that. And so I think a lot of times, even if like I don't see myself as like, oh, I'm a hearing person, or I'm a seeing person.
Yeah.
But yet when we know people who are deaf or mute, it's like that's a huge part of their identity because it's a minority. And so just wanting to recognize more that is a part of me.
Absolutely.
And be thankful and grateful for the way that God has used that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as I've found myself thinking about that, it's made me realize how much I've taken for granted in my whole identity. What, lack of a better word, blind spots do I have to who I am? Because I just assume that's the way it is. Yeah, thank you. Well, we do want to encourage you to continue to think about these, question and learn, both what we've written here on the board and also the questions that have come up from the conversations about that. And I think it's important that in the midst of our questions, we as Christian people center ourselves around what maybe God has to say about this thing and about who we are. And so, at Biola, we have this saying that we strive to think biblically about everything. And I think it's fair enough to say we could think biblically about diversity. And I think it's true that the Bible celebrates the diversity that makes us who we are, both as individuals and as a collective people. It celebrates the diversity in our ethnicity, in our gender, in our age. For example, we've got Proverbs praising gray hair as a crown of glory. I hope baldness counts too. As found on the path of righteousness. But then we've also got Paul telling Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you're a young man. And then Jesus says, allow the children to come to me. Don't forbid them, because God's kingdom belongs to people like these. That's a radical statement for Jesus to make in that generation, in that time frame, when children were disenfranchised. They were thought as liabilities, or at best, assets. They were very economical in thought. And so for Jesus to affirm not just their place in the kingdom, but their personhood in the kingdom was a pretty radical thing. How can we learn to develop the aspects of our diversity that we have pushed to the sides, we've thought not to value? I think in our culture, we value youth just fine. What target age demographic that every marketer wants to market to? It's us. The age range between where most of you are at and where some of us are at, it's typically young people who are setting trends and buying new products, and our economy pushes a lot of our identity and our values, doesn't it? And so we have less problem with these, I think. I mean, I've been like quoting this to myself since I was in junior high. But we may also relegate our appreciation of older folks to the margins. How do people in the U.S. treat the elderly? Are they the butt of a joke? Are they removed from our sight? Are they brought into our homes and celebrated and cared for and learned from? I think it's also true that the Bible celebrates men and women. We recognize that we have brokenness in this world. And that brokenness is deep in the way the world is. But if we go back to the beginning, it seems that God blesses his creation. He blesses humanity and the maleness and femaleness of us. And God puts God's image on our sexual identity. God blesses that. I think it's true also if we look at the story of Jesus. In another very patriarchal culture, he was constantly affirming women, incorporating them into his ministry. They traveled with him. They walked with him. They even bankrolled his ministry, which is crazy to me, and I think in some regards. I don't know, I mean, there's a couple references to rich men providing money for Jesus' ministry, but there's an explicit reference to a group of women that had the money to bankroll what Jesus was doing. Jesus wasn't working. He didn't have a day job and then he went and healed people on the off days. Like he relied on the generosity, financially and otherwise, of people, and that included women. He celebrated that. I think that's important for us to recognize. The Bible celebrates both our maleness and our femaleness, our men and our women here. I didn't make a slide for it, but I think that gets into the Bible celebrates diversity in socioeconomic status. The fact that Jesus could do what he did because of rich women who were able to fund it is a beautiful thing. Acts 2, the church came together and they shared their possessions. And in that, there was enough for everyone. But yet, at the same time, Jesus teaches us, blessed are the poor. And that means rich folks, you got a lot to learn from them. You got a lot to learn from them. And so what does that look like? And finally, I do think God celebrates our ethnicity. And when I think of the Bible's celebration of diversity, I think of Pentecost. Personally, I think there's a lot of ways the church could have been founded, right? Group of people get together, pray a lot, fire falls, and everybody levitates across the water.
That'd be cool.
Group of people get together, pray a lot, fire falls, and the whole city gets healed. That would be good theology, beautiful, right? But that's not what happened. Good people got together, they prayed a lot, and they began to speak in other tongues. They spoke in an area where people from all nations were present. And when those people heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were mystified because everyone heard them speaking in their native language. You see, to God, it was important that all cultures were celebrated. What if this was reversed? What if this was reversed? The Christians spoke one language, but people were given the ability to hear it. There's examples of that in the Bible. That could have been the case. But no, God communicates to the heart of our culture, the heart of our identity. He communicates through the language of our hearts. You see, what was scattered at Babel, the seeds sown at Babel became a harvest at Pentecost. And we get to see that while Babel had an idea of the future, of where we're headed as a people, that one city where we're all united, that future city that we're striving toward is going to have God at the center. But you see, as Revelation 21 reminds us, that it'll be that city that kings and queens from all over the earth bring the glory of their nations. That means the best of their cultural identities into that city, and it's celebrated there. And Revelation 7 reminds us every nation, every tribe, every people and language will be standing there before the throne, before the Lamb. If we claim to be people of the book, if we claim that the Bible shapes who we are, we need to think about diversity and our identities in the way that the Bible does. And sometimes, we punt to quick verses. But I think you all are, assumably, college students. You're here because you love, to some degree, learning, and you love enriching your life through that. And so I want to encourage you to think deeply and biblically about who you are, about your identity, and about the complexities that make that up. And so just to close on this verse, I come back to our first question. Why does diversity matter? You know, the Gentile church in Galatia, they were being forced by the Jews to assimilate into a very Jewish expression of Christianity. This form isn't negating our differences. It's saying, don't let our differences divide us. Our unity in Christ isn't a sameness. It isn't assimilation. But it's a beautiful expression of each of these differences. And so, I guess with just a few minutes to go, I'll close with some thoughts on how I got here. I mentioned Taiwan, and I mentioned Taiwan being the first time I had to engage with myself and my story in a new space. In Taiwan, I was engaging with a different religious setting as well for the first time. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to Christian elementary school. I was homeschooled in high school. And for the first time, I was in a not Christian space. And so I was thinking about this. Who is this God I say I believe in? And I started to study not just the Bible in a new way, but the culture around me. You see, in Taiwan, like many Asian cultures, they're much more collectivistic than I am as a white American person, an American person who celebrates independence. We give a whole day to it. We fight for our freedom. We are very individualistic in our mind frame, but I saw this collective group identity, and that seemed to express itself throughout the New Testament a little bit more fuller than I could map my individualism on top of. And so for the first time I started to see, wait a minute, there's beautiful aspects of what God said is true and good in this other culture that I can't find in myself. And I started to ask, what else is there? What else is there? What else is there in me that I valued deeply and highly as cultural norms and goods that I might call into question? One was how my masculine identity was expressed. I was always told from a young age, you're going to be a leader. And I believed it. I was going to be a leader. We go to a multi-ethnic church in East LA. The core of the church is made up predominantly of Latino folks who are from the neighborhood and a few folks like ourselves, white or a few Asian folks that have moved into the neighborhood. And there's differences in ethnic background and class. And so one day we had a necessary conversation. We said, these ideologies, these cultural assumptions we have, they're affecting our ministry and the way we communicate. So let's talk about that. Our pastor very wisely separated the two groups and said, go talk about leadership. Go talk about leadership as folks from the neighborhood. Go talk about leadership as relocators. And we did that. I'd love to tell you more about it. If you have questions, I'll tell you more. But one thing we discovered in our group was that there's leadership, but there isn't really this thing called followership. For me, I realized I was never told to be a good follower. I was told to be a good leader. And so the best followers are just leaders in training. They're the next one. There's this like upward mobility, this drive to be the next, the top, the best. And then one day I was reading through Matthew, and the mother of James and John came to Jesus, and I was like, "Hey, Jesus, do you think my sons could sit next to you when you are running this place?" And I resonated with that because that's my mom. She would do the same thing. And this back and forth happens, and then Jesus lets them know, if you think leadership in my conception, in my kingdom, is about having the top spot, you're missing the point. If you think you want to be the greatest, you need to be the least. If you think you want to be the best, then you need to serve. And all of a sudden, the way I expressed my masculine identity, this desire for leadership and comeuppance, couldn't be expressed the same way. All of a sudden I was in Taiwan and I was realizing the way I grew up wasn't the full story. And I had a lot to learn from the people around me. Just like today I felt like I had a lot to learn from you. So I want to thank you for sharing, for talking with us, for talking with each other, and engaging this together.
I know that sometimes we come into workshops and we're excited about the topic and we're going to take a lot of notes and we're going to find answers, we're going to find solutions, and we're going to apply them, and we're going to change, we're going to be different people when we leave. But I hope that this workshop was slightly different in that it raised a lot of things for you to continue to explore instead of just giving you answers. I hope that it was, in a way, a little disorienting in that it gave you questions to think about, and you can hopefully go out, have questions about yourself, and have curious, respectful questions for other people that are here at the conference as well, so that you can learn more about yourself as well as them.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.